I wanted to talk about big ideas for big problems today, rather than talking about big opportunities. And that's a nuanced difference that I want to convey to you. We live in a world where people are very obsessed with opportunities, and I think that that's a wrong way of going towards the future. A focus on opportunities has gotten us into trouble. If you just to explain a little bit more, if you think about opportunities, you can think about the market for selfie sticks, right? So the market for selfie sticks is growing at 20% per year. So that's a very nice commercial opportunity, right? But if everyone starts going after that opportunity, the world will be, awash with selfie sticks, and then you have to ask yourself, is that going to help the world become a better place or not? I don't think we need selfie sticks. I actually think it creates people that are self-obsessed rather than trying to solve the world's problems. So in the company that I've done a lot of work with, we focus a lot on problems. We try to look at the big problems in the world and see how we can solve them. So, you can think about climate change, or about poverty, or about income inequality and gender inequality and the refugee crisis in Europe. Those are things that are going to have a big impact on all of us in the world. And those are going to be the things that governments and individuals will spend most money on in the long term to try to solve these very, very big problems. So I would like to encourage you as young entrepreneurs to focus on problems rather than opportunities. Opportunities will get us deeper into trouble. Focusing on problems will actually make the world a better place. So that's just as a small introduction, right? So the biggest human problems are the biggest commercial opportunities. What I want to do today for you, it's going to be quite active. There will be an exercise that I will ask you to do as well later on. But I want to do two things today. One is do an exercise with you which is called system mapping. This is an exercise that allows you to get a better understanding of these big problems that you're trying to find a solution to. I'll explain later how it works, and then we'll do an exercise. And also I'd like to give you a few tips on how to better pitch your ideas. There are many brilliant people out there that have very nice ideas, but the moment that they go to market, the moment that they try to find support for their ideas, that's where things go wrong, right? This is something that I've seen a lot. So I want to give you a few tips on how to build like an engaging narrative around your inventions. So first of all, systems mapping. How many of you have heard of systems mapping or have even done it? No one? That's very good. So just to give you a little description here, systems mapping is a way of mapping your problem, of exploring your problem by mapping all the stakeholders and all the behaviors of the stakeholders and the relationships between the behaviors in a bigger system. Many people that come up with solutions to something, they focus on one relationship. And we've learned that often problems are embedded in a bigger system. And you have to understand that bigger system to come up with a good solution, right? Just to give you an example, if you look at the problem of traffic jams in Bangkok or many other big cities. Often the solution, like historically, now people have become wiser, but historically the solution to traffic jams was to build more roads, right? Actually, when you build more roads, people buy more cars. And those new roads are also going to be blocked. So people, more people end up stuck in traffic jams, right? If you look at this as a system and you say, okay, what are all the different things that influence traffic jams? You can start thinking of many more things. It's not only the amount of roads, but it's also You know, when are people supposed to start work? You know, do they all have to travel at the same time of day to their work? Can they work from home? You know, is public transport working well? If you have a better public transport, people will use less cars. Are there the right incentives in place for people to not use a car, for instance? And if you look at that bigger system, you'll find out that you can actually solve the traffic problem in many different ways, not just by building more roads. And you know, you can, if you allow people to not be stuck in traffic, you end up having happier people. They can spend their time in a different way, more productive, even with their family, or you know, or being healthier. And you end up having a much better society, right? So understanding the bigger context of a problem is very helpful in coming up with the right solution, because often people focus on one part of the big problem, and without knowing it, they actually create a bigger problem. So if you do this this systems mapping, it is first of all a very good way of understanding the big problem. It allows you to speak about it in a better way when you present your solutions. It is also a way where often you discover things. You discover that there are more solutions to the same problem. And if you talk about these big problems that I mentioned before, if you talk about climate change, or you talk about poverty, or you talk about you know, the crisis in Syria, those are very complex problems that have to be solved with a number of people together, a number of stakeholders together. Climate change cannot be solved by one government or one company, right? It's always a collaboration. So if you do this exercise with different stakeholders, with different people that have an interest in solving the problem, it is a great way of getting everyone to agree on the bigger picture, which is one of the most important things when working together with different stakeholders. I've done a lot of collaborations in my work. That's basically all I do, is bring people from government and from different sectors together to work on the same problem. And the challenge is always to get everyone to agree on what that bigger system looks like. And this is a great way of doing that. So let me give you the building blocks of how you do systems mapping. These are just the basic things you need to know. And again, we'll do an exercise later. So in systems mapping, you map relationships between actors in the system, or between behaviors in the system. And you can have positive relationships or negative relationships. So a positive relationship, for instance, is, conceptually, a positive relationship is if you have more of one thing, you will get more of another thing. So it could, for instance, be if you spend more on advertising and promotion, you will have more sales, right? It's very simple. That's a positive relationship. You can have negative relationships. For instance, selling ice cream on rainy days, right? If you have more rainy days, you'll sell less ice cream. Normally, I don't know how it is in Thailand actually, but normally, that's what happens. And then you have delays in the system. This is also interesting to keep in mind. So you could have, for instance, if I run a company and things are going very well, so I decide that I want to expand and I want to hire new people. If I decide today that I'm going to hire new people, it doesn't mean that today I have new people, right? You have to interview, people have to give notice. So it'll take a few months before I actually have new people. That's a delay in the system. So I can take a decision today, but the impact will come later, right? So you have positive influences, negative influences, and sometimes you have a delay in the system. And then you have something that they call feedback loops. These are important to understand as well. So a feedback loop, you can have a positive feedback loop, which means that if you have more of something, you get more of something else, but that more of something else again has an impact on the first thing, right? So you get more and more and more. And an example could be your sales. If you sell more of a good product, it means you have more customers. If you have more happy customers, they do more what they call word of mouth. They talk more about your product, which means that eventually you'll sell more. And you have more customers, they talk well about your product, and you sell more, right? So that's a positive feedback loop. That's important to keep in mind also. But then you also have negative feedback loops. An example of a negative feedback loop could be when you're taking a shower, right, and the water is too hot, you turn down the temperature and the water gets colder, right? That's a negative feedback loop. If the water is too cold, you turn up the heat and it gets warmer, right? So these are feedback loops, and sometimes there's a delay in there, but you have positive and negative feedback loops. I know this is a little bit boring, but these are like the main components of building a systems map. Before we do an exercise, I'm going to take you through the steps of doing a systems map, right? So the first thing you need to do is think about your systems boundary. So think about your problem and think, what you want to solve it for. Do you want to solve it for your village or your town or your company, or do you want to solve it for Thailand or for the whole world, right? So you have to decide on your systems boundaries, because with this systems mapping, you'll see when you do it, you can go on forever. So before you know it, you're covering the world, right? So the first step is decide what is the boundary of the system that you're going to be mapping. And then you pick a few, what we call nodes. These are the players in your system, or the behaviors in your system that are kind of the main drivers of the system. To give you an example, when we talk about waste, the waste problem, right? What are the most important things that determine how much waste there is in the world or in the country? It is, how many consumers are actually recycling their waste, right? How many recycling points are there? Are the producers of the products that you consume, are they producing green packaging for their products, right? So these are different. These are kind of the main nodes or the main components in your waste system. So this is a way to start, and then you map the relationships between them. So if you have producers that act responsibly, if you have more of them, it means there are more green products out there, which means that there's less waste. If you have more consumers that do recycling, and here's an interesting feedback loop with recycling points. So if you have more recycling points, it's easier for consumers to recycle. So more recycling points means more recycling, and if there are more consumers recycling, you tend to get more recycling points. If you have that, you also get less waste, right? So these are the kind of the main components in the waste system. Once you have these main components, you start exploring them. And then you say, okay, what are the things that influence having responsible producers, for instance? And so what are the influences and what are the effects of having responsible producers? So you can start saying, okay, if I have regulation in place, regulation will make producers act more responsibly, right? So more regulation means more responsible producers. How about consumers and their behavior, right? If you educate consumers, they will act more responsibly and they will recycle. And the more consumers recycle, the more energy is being saved. right? Because all of that waste is being recycled. Are there incentives in place for consumers to recycle? Do they get a reward when they recycle? So these are positive influences. For a recycling center, is there a good business case? If I want to start a recycling center, but if I don't make any money, I'm not going to do it, right? So is there a business case for someone to say, okay, I'm going to start a recycling point? What does that business case depend on? Scrap prices is one of the things that influences if there's a business case, right? So if the market for scrap metal out there, or the market for aluminum or plastic has good prices, it's more interesting for someone to start that business, to start a recycling business, right? So this is just to give you an idea of how to build a map. So you start with the big actors in the system and their behavior, and then you explore the relationships between them, and you dive deeper and deeper and deeper. And this is just a very simple start of looking at a system. This can get very, very but it's actually very entertaining. You know, it's very complex, but you learn a lot. You discover relationships that you didn't consider before. So it can end up looking as messy as this, right? Normally when you do this exercise, you end up with a big chaos, but a lot of ideas, right? So normally after you do your mapping, then you should review, test, and refine. So once you have the big mess mapped out, you have to go over it and think about it again and put it in order. And then you start using it. So then normally what we do is, once we do a systems mapping with different companies or government actors, once we all agree what the system looks like, then we say, okay, what capabilities do we have in the room? Right? What interests do the different actors in the room have? And how can we work together to solve part of this puzzle? Right? Did that make sense to you, or is this too complex at 9 o'clock in the morning? Yeah. If you have questions, let me know. If not, we'll do an exercise now. I would ask you to split yourselves up in groups of 5 or 6 and get together and try to build the map that addresses this problem. How to reduce drinks waste in Thailand. And drinks waste are like the aluminum cans that you find everywhere and the plastic bottles that are floating in the ocean. There's a lot of that in Thailand. Thailand is one of the big polluters in the world when it comes to plastic. So this is a big challenge. If we manage to solve it, we help Thailand and many other things. People don't like to be sold, right? You go on the metro here in Bangkok, and they're trying to sell you things all the time, right? So we have an allergy towards people that are trying to sell things to us, right? And it's the same way with venture capitalists or with people that invest their money into solutions. They don't want to be sold on things. They want to be part of the solution, right? So we call that co-creation. So rather than going up to someone and telling him, here's my solution, you should go up to people and say, here's a problem, right? This is what that problem means for you. Let's solve it together, right? Engage with people in that way. And then and then you can do your systems mapping together, and then automatically you can move in your solution there. That's a much smarter way of selling a problem. Selling a solution, right? So co-create, don't sell. Another thing that I would really recommend you to think about, and again, many very smart entrepreneurs and inventors, they don't do this exercise, but they should. Ask yourself what's in it for them. Normally people that invent something are so focused on their invention or their solution that they don't think about what's in it for the other stakeholders? You depend on other stakeholders to finance your solution. So what's in it for them? And I often use three ways of looking at that question. So what's in it for them commercially? If you're talking to a company, think about what is this company trying to achieve commercially? And how does my solution fit into that? And talk about your solution in terms of their commercial interest, not your interest, their commercial interest. Sometimes a company, some of the better companies, are interested in solving problems for the world. Like I said before, try to solve big problems. So before you talk to a company to sell your solution, think about what is this company trying to do for the world? And how does my solution fit into their bigger plan for the world? Right? And the third one is very important also. The person that you're talking to. This is super important. Make sure that you talk to the right person within the company that you're trying to sell your solution to. There's so many people that are talking to the wrong persons, and then it's a waste of energy and a waste of enthusiasm. But once you talk to the right person, think about what is this individual, what does he need or she need? Like what is this person trying to achieve? What is his or her next career step within the company? If I work together with this person on my solution, does it mean that that person looks good in the company? Is that person going to make a promotion? Or, is that person going to have a good commercial year? So think about the individual that you're talking to also. So those are the three levels that I would recommend to think about before you start talking to companies. And then the third one is very important, and I'm going to show you a little video on that also. This is about how you present your solution. A lot of people, they talk about what their solution is about. So they say, I'm building this car, right? And it can go from 0 to 100 kilometers an hour in 7 seconds. And it has leather seats, and it has great air conditioning and a digital display. Why did you buy it? That's not a great way of talking about your car, right? Because all cars, they go from 0 to 100 in 7 seconds. And all of them have air conditioning, right? So some of the smarter companies, and I'm sure you've seen them, they talk about, we all want to be free. We want to travel. We want to discover. We want to explore. Right? So if you're the type of person that wants to discover the world, we have the car for you. That's a much more convincing way to talk about something. Right? First talk to people about why they should work with you. So what is the bigger purpose? What is this idea about? What is the bigger thought behind it? Is it about saving humanity? Like Elon Musk, he's trying to bring the human race to other planets. He's not selling his rockets. Like he says, the future of the human race goes beyond the Earth. And it's a big idea, right? And some people really buy into that. And they give him Elon Musk, he goes anywhere and people give him billions of dollars because he has these big ideas. And then they don't care whether he builds a rocket or a car, or it doesn't matter, right? So there's this guy called Sinek, and I'm going to show you part of his video. I recommend you to Google it later and look at it. But he says people don't buy what you do; they buy why you do it. I think he gives the example of Apple. You know, they make computers and they make iPads and iPhones, right? But like everyone makes computers and smartphones. But Apple talks about it in a different way, right? The way Apple communicates is they say, like, we want to break the status quo. We want to do things that have not been done before. We want to explore new ways of doing things. And then the people that also have those values, the people that feel like that's what makes them want to buy an Apple computer or an iPad or an iPhone, right? If Apple would say, like, we have these computers and, you know, they look nice and they have like a great like LED backlighting, and everyone has that, right? So first, when you present your idea, first talk about why, like what is the big issue that you're trying to solve here? Really drive that home. Then you can talk about how you do that, and then you can talk about your product or your solution. If you don't have any questions, then I'm going to let you off the hook.